sometimes when we're there and over there, so show up there and we've got Damon and all right. How's it going there, Deanna?
Good. I'll just let you know that Damon said question 2 and/or 4 is good for her.
Okay. Yeah.
So we have 10 participants online right now.
Oh, that's super. So you started it?
I did. I started the webinar and the recording.
Okay. So I am just going to do a quick sound check as we get going here, and to make sure this is an opportunity to check the chat box, but just to make sure that everybody online is hearing me. How's that going? If you can write in the chat box to confirm. And yeah, great. So welcome everybody online. We've got as many people online as we do in the room, but that's lovely. And a really big welcome to the Masters and Honours Seminar, to other Health Research Institute colleagues, and to everybody online. Many of you have met me before, but for those of you that haven't, my name is Margot Parks. I'm a professor in the School of Health Sciences, and I have been fortunate to live and work and learn on Platte Eighty territory since 2009. And I'm going to come back to that idea as we begin here, but I'm also really pleased to be speaking to you today as an incoming co-lead of the Health Research Institute, which is the group that's bringing this, one of the groups that's contributing to our seminar series. So this is the first of this semester for our seminar series. We've always tried to begin our seminar series with, we've often had panels, we've often had Indigenous colleagues coming in. This time we're really excited to be emphasising the theme of diverse UNBC research careers. And so you can see we've even got 2 more panelists online that you'll meet shortly. But I just wanted to take a moment to think a little bit about, as we begin today's session, about this important theme of diversity. And we, on one hand, we're going to be hearing about diversity in terms of people's backgrounds and experiences. But I really want to acknowledge that the Health Research Institute and all of us here at UNBC are also acknowledging the diverse perspectives, territories, ideas, experiences that everybody brings and comes to have conversations about health research. And in particular, at this time, for the first HRI seminar for this series, I really just want you all to take a moment to think about all of the different places, but particularly the different Indigenous territories that you, or territories or home countries or home places, and the peoples from those places that have influenced your understanding of health research. I'd like you to just take a moment. Maybe you've had a summer, you've crossed different territories, you've been back to places that you've come from. For myself, over the summer, I've returned from the home territories that I grew up with in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Ngāi Tahu territory on the east coast of the South Island of New Zealand. And I'm somebody, in coming to live and work in northern BC, I've had to learn a lot about the way that colonialism plays out, and especially as we try to understand the context of northern BC. And so for this summer, as we come to the end of the summer and enter into the fall, we know that the summer has raised really important issues including challenging ones that impact health research implications as well, around the discovery of unmarked burial sites, around the importance of Indigenous experiences in territories that have been impacted very harshly by historical grievances. And so whenever we come into a conversation, I'm leaking paper here, whenever we come into a conversation about health research in northern BC, but anywhere across Canada and many parts of the world, we do always need to be bringing our perspectives and our experiences of those issues. So as we start today, we hope this is going to be very interactive, but I really want, as we move into the questions later, to acknowledge your own experiences of those issues. There's also another theme in today's talk, which is around, we're profiling diverse careers, but there are some other really important issues in the backdrop that our Health Research Institute needs to think about. And one of those is also how we're dealing with different approaches and recognition of challenges around issues, really hard issues like institutional racism and histories of things that are not really, they haven't necessarily been as clearly part of our conversations at the HRI over the last decade, and which we're all learning about. And so I'm opening up the conversation today in a way that is also acknowledging that. And part of the reason to do that, you're about to receive a few announcements and sort of upcoming ideas around the HRI. But I want to flag a couple of other things that is happening on campus in the next little while. And one of them is that our HRI seminars happen on Thursdays. And next Thursday is a very important day. It's the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. I almost wore an orange shirt today in anticipation of that, but it's something that I'd really encourage you, in the spirit of this idea of diversity, to think about coming to the UNB circle that's happening, UNBC's circle that's happening at 10 o'clock next Thursday. There's been notifications about that. If you're not aware of it, make sure you could always in the contact information, you could contact Leanna and we could make sure you find out about it. Because the HRI isn't going to be tackling all issues relating to health research, but these are backdrop issues that are really important. And finally, along the same lines, we're going to be taking our moments when we have our, every third Thursday, we're going to have these seminars. And we're going to try to take moments to sort of let you know of other things that are happening that could be relating to these issues, about things that influence our understanding of health. One of those is an initiative that I'm involved with on campus, which is called the Collective on Anti-Racism. And the Collective on Anti-Racism is another approach to tackling the need for attention to diversity and racism on campus. And we just wanted to flag that there are some really exciting things happening in those spaces. There's a new BIPOC caucus on campus for Black, Indigenous and people of colour that's just been launched, which is really exciting. And there are ongoing conversations among colleagues who are really interested in tackling those issues. So if you're interested, we're about to go into our slide deck and you'll see the contact information for Leanna. And if people would like to find out about that Collective on Anti-Racism, about how we can all, whatever our origins, be contributing to conversations about diversity and to be addressing and dismantling the processes that create racism, we're really eager to welcome people into those conversations. So those are a lot of ideas behind one simple thing. We're talking about diverse careers, but as soon as you mention the word diverse, we also have to think about all of these other dimensions. And as we open up our HRI seminar this year, we're going to be really trying to weave those themes into all of our sessions. So we're now going to hand over, as the co-lead of the HRI, Martha McLeod is the other co-lead. We have other Health Research Institute members, Sarah Gray, and we have Leanna Garraway, our Health Research Institute manager. We have Cara Hart, who's a new member of our Leadership Council. And we also have past members of our HRI, Neil Hanlon and others. So we really appreciate the Health Research Institute Leadership Council is a really collective effort. And so a big kudos to our group. But Leanna's going to just give us a couple of slides about the HRI and about the series, and then we're going to get into our panel discussion. So over to you, Leanna.
Great, thanks very much, Margaret. So thank you again for everyone for attending. I just have a few slides just to give you an overview of the HRI, which is a networking institute on campus that helps facilitate connections between all the different health research and their partners. And I just wanted to acknowledge our sponsors and contributions from the different schools around campus, and also Sun Life Financial, which financially sponsors this speaker series. And as Margot mentioned, if anyone wants to reach out, you have any questions, you want to join the HRI, you want to know anything more about our activities, please feel free to reach out. Here's our contact information. And our next speaker series will be October 21st, and we'll be hearing from Julia Bickford, who's the Regional Director of Research Evaluation and Analytics at Northern Health, and somebody who I've worked quite a bit with, and I think quite a few people on this panel as well have worked with. So it'll be really exciting to hear about what the research department at Northern Health has been up to. So I will just end the slideshow now so that we can see our other presenters.
That's great, Leanna. So the main message there, we'll come back at the end, but for those of you online, for those of you here, we do this seminar series in partnership with the Honours and Masters seminar. So some of you are going to be regular visitors in person. And for those of you online, a lot of people got used to the online model over the last year. But we are going to be, where possible, committing to gathering in person. It's really nice to be able to gather. We're pleased to be able to do that in 3D. So we would welcome you back from your screens or your offices to join us here in 7158. So we do have a couple of different panelists who are also online, and I'm shortly going to introduce our panelists. I really want to underscore that as we've indicated with the last slide, we're profiling, the HRI seminar profiles health in Northern BC. We've intended to profile UNBC researchers initially because there wasn't any prior way to do that. So the seminar series helped us to do that. But we are increasingly wanting to profile that there are not just health careers at the university. There are lots of ways to have health careers, both in and outside universities with different health authorities, whether it's FNHA, Northern Health, and Caris County Family Services. So over the course of our seminar series in the coming years, you're going to start to see us also profiling some of that partnered work. So although our panelists today are mostly based and connected at UNBC, we just really want to acknowledge that there's lots of other ways that people could imagine health research careers. And I was really glad actually that some of our colleagues kind of gave us a good prod on that when they got the message. Hey, you're like, is it really health research only at universities? That's rubbish. So it's a good, they did not say that's rubbish. That was my, that's my translation. So we have this fabulous panel. I'll just walk you through very briefly, and then we'll stop me talking and I'll start asking questions. I'm going to just mention briefly, but you'll hear more from the panelists about their background. So I'm going to do a pretty brief intro. So we have Professor Neil Hanlon, who's in the Department of Geography and has, as I mentioned, previously been a Health Research Institute Leadership Council member. We have Trina Fife, UNBC Health Researchers Librarian with the Division of Medical Sciences, but also not so secretly a past UNBC PhD graduate. So Dr. Trina Fife has moved in the time I've been here, has been moving through various roles. And that's part of what we want to profile is this different roles that people have. Really glad to have Katie Cornish here, who's with the Health Research Institute and our Knowledge Synthesis Centre. And Katie's also had lots of different experience in different roles and jobs, including surviving doing the masters with me, amazing, and still wanting to do more health research, incredible. I don't think she expected that when she started. And I'm really delighted to have Sarah Gray here, who's also on our Health Research Institute. We really enjoy working together, given the differences between our health research. There's always points of connection. And Sarah is also a Canada Research Chair, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. And then online, we have Damon Candola. Damon is a postdoctoral fellow who's done quite a bit of work at UNBC in different stages of her, and that includes doctoral work. And I can't remember, Damon, I think you did your master's too. So we'll hear a little bit more about that with Damon. And I'm delighted too that we have Christiana Onabola, who is in the PhD program. And Christiana is a Vanier scholar who is progressing work that's focused on health, environment, and the Sustainable Development Goals. So we've got a great range of speakers, and I now get to ask people the first question. They're not surprise questions, but we're going to, the first question I'm going to ask everybody. And for those of you listening, I really want you to think, how would I answer that question if I was asked it? So they're questions that are relevant to everybody, no matter what stage of your career is. So I'm going to start with you, Trina, with this first question, which is, where were you and what were you doing when you first had a thought about doing health research? And how has that kind of continued? Has that continued to influence your work? And where is it? How has it unfolded for you?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So as a librarian, I sort of fell into the world of health. I did my master's at the University of Toronto in information studies. And I was desperate to get a job after, like everyone is. I had really wanted to go into government libraries because that's where I had spent my time when I was going to school. But then I got a job at a hospital library just on the outskirts of Toronto. And then I moved on to a teaching hospital downtown Toronto, and I just loved it. You know, it was really rewarding to be able to, you know, help healthcare providers have the evidence they need to make decisions like around policy and patient care. And then I ended up thinking, oh, you know what, I really wouldn't mind getting into the academic side and doing more teaching because I really enjoyed that. And so that's when I saw the posting for here, and I applied and moved out here for the 2 to 5 year plan, which has now been 16 years. I think everyone has a similar story, but yeah, and then getting the opportunity to really work with health researchers on campus, and because a lot of times I come in to their work and in various ways, and so I got kind of the, you know, the motivation to really want my own program of research. And so with some mentors along the way, and one really, I don't know if you know this about Prince George, but whenever you go to the airport, right, you always end up on a flight with someone you know. And so I ended up on a flight back from Vancouver to Prince George with Dr. Jose Lavoie, who used to be a faculty member here. And we had a conversation about research, and she said, you know, I was a new mom at the time and was very apprehensive about, you know, diving into a master's or a PhD program. And so she encouraged me just to take one course. And so I took her mixed methods course and then applied for the PhD under her supervision with Dr. Pate. And that kind of went from there. So it's never too late.
No, it's great. Thanks, Marina, for starting us off. And the nice thing about this is that you'll find that most people you ask have an interesting story to tell, and we're going to have a good dose of that today. So Neil, we'll come over to you.
Oh, good segue. This better be interesting.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
good story to tell, no pressure.
Well, I'm a bit of an odd duck up here because I'm a human geographer. I'm a social scientist, and all of my degrees are in human geography. When I was an undergraduate, nobody had offered courses in what was called then medical geography. No, I'd never heard of it. And so I took all these courses in urban geography and economic geography, and all my electives were in political science and economics and that kind of stuff. And then I did an exchange. I went off to live in England and study in England for a year. And they said, well, you gotta go pick your courses. And so I went through the list and there was this medical geography. And I'd love to tell you, I took the course and changed my life. No, I wanted to take the course and the person was on leave that year, on sabbatical. But it must have, like, I'd never seen that before. So I stored that away somewhere. Finished up there and then applied to do grad work and I went to Queen's University and they just accept you. Like, it's not like some programs where you have to have a supervisor going in. They look at your record and they say, yeah, come along and then figure out who your supervisor is. So you kind of interview all the profs and everything. And lo and behold, I meet a medical geographer, right? And we just started chatting. And go, yeah, okay, let's see if there's something there. And it was like, just kind of falling into it. And then you get into it and you go, okay, this is where I want to be. And it just kind of from there, a master's and PhD, and it just kept building.
That's neat. Yeah, and so I think the nice thing is that the UNBC in a short space, as you'll start to see, has a lot of diversity in our health research, and that's part of what we're wanting to profile in our seminar series. I'm going to go online. Damon, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Nice. So we thought we could have Damon and Christiana's video, but that's okay. We've got their voice, which is amazing. Like, this is a very ambitious plan we're operating here. So Damon, it's really great to have you here. We can actually see Damon's photo, which is nice. And so I wonder how you would answer that question, Damon. Where were you what were you doing when you had your first sort of intentions or aspirations towards health research?
Yeah, I guess there's not, for me, a particular point in time. I mean, I always had an interest in science. So after high school, I started taking, different courses in the sciences, mostly introductory, things like biology and chemistry. And so I started out with a real lab and bench focus. I volunteered with Genome BC to UNBC. And I think the spin into health and population-based research really occurred for me in my third year of the biomedical studies program. And I took a course in research methods, and there was a capstone project, and that kind of really got me thinking about, health research being an actual career. So that would be, I guess, that defining moment where, I went on into a master's and then a PhD, which I never imagined I'd ever do. So.
And can you just describe your role now, Damon?
Yeah, so I am currently a postdoctoral fellow with the School of Nursing at UNBC, and working on a variety of projects in patient engagement, cardiovascular health, and health services.
Neat. Great to have you with us. Thanks, Damon. So I'll come back into the panel here and we'll come around to Katie. The question, that first question, where were you or what were you doing when you had what could be that first intention or aspiration to be a health researcher?
I finished high school. I liked science, like I feel like most of us in this room probably do or did. And then I moved up to Prince George with the intention of going to UNBC. I really liked Northern BC. I really liked I liked the culture of like attending classes at UNBC, and I knew that I wanted to go somewhere different. So I came from Vancouver Island. I didn't want to go to UVic like everyone else. So I decided to come up here. I did a bachelor's of health science. And then in my fourth year, kind of similar to Damon, I kind of started to really enjoy some of those like methods courses and like courses on different types of like research design, and kind of just starting to think about planning things that you wanted to study, not necessarily just like what was an assignment, right? And then I finished my bachelor's degree and kind of wasn't over that thought. So I signed up and I did a master's degree. So I have a master's of health science. I did it with Margot, a freshly minted master's degree. I presented
or I defended my thesis online virtually at the start of the pandemic. So you can push through in all these different types of ways.
No, that's great. And so we'll come around to some of those dig into a couple of those other points that you've raised with the other questions. So we'll finish our lap around. I'm going to go to you, Christiana. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. So Christiana Onamoto, I mentioned earlier, she's doing her PhD. She's a candidate in the UNBC PhD program. She's also a Vanier Scholar and started her journey in her homeland of Nigeria and has moved into and made her way through various paths to Northern BC. So Christiana, where were you or what were you doing when you first got interested in health research? And how's that influenced your journey?
So yeah, thank you very much. Well, my aspiration to be a health researcher was from back in the day when I was working in Nigeria. And that was in the era of the MDGs, that's the Millennium Development Goals. And my job at the time was in monitoring and evaluation of a state health program, the Partnership for Transforming Health Systems, PATHS, probably may sound familiar to some of you. And efforts in the program were targeted at improving the social determinants of health in northern Nigeria. But one thing that was so obvious with health, during the MDGs is that health indicators were largely socioeconomically driven. And so while in contrast, fast forward to when the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, were launched in 2015, we could say since then that health indicators have actually evolved to encompass broader dynamics that are, environmental, ecological, and cultural, as opposed to just being socioeconomically determined health indicators. So it's actually this appreciation of a wide range of dynamics influencing health that has shaped the direction of how my research career, has been, and the work I'm currently progressing, which is considering how for instance, the interactions of land, water, and energy systems could distort experiences of health outcomes and of equity in health, in terms of how populations with differing social advantage or disadvantage experience health and its determinants. And because most of the problems have actually been attributed to the challenges of siloed approaches and some integrative lapses in the way these sectors actually work together. So that actually has informed the central context of my work as an interdisciplinary health researcher to actually explore how the integrative capacity of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the cross-sectoral nature of their targets and indicators, and how this can support integrated decision-making for health, particularly in land, water, energy working landscapes. Thank you.
That's great. That's really great, Christiana. Thank you. And I think we've got a theme here of people not only crossing boundaries between countries and places and homes and families and moving across all sorts of things to bring their health research careers to life. And somebody that's done that spectacularly is Dr. Sarah Gray. So
again, I feel like you've built it up.
Oh, no pressure. You can just tell any old story. But Sarah, how would you say that you had your first thoughts as a health researcher and how it's influenced your work?
So yeah, it took me a bit. I don't think I right away thought of myself as a health researcher. I did my undergraduate degree in biology, and it was in my final year of my undergraduate degree when I was taking, I really was very much interested in physiology. So I ended up doing my PhD with Nancy Sherwood at UVic, who worked in the area of hormones. And she actually was an evolutionary biology lab, and I just happened to work sort of in the area of the impacts of certain neuropeptides in mammalian physiology. So it started out actually as really quite fundamental sciences, but in my work, the neuropeptide we were working on, we found it to be very much involved in metabolism. And at the time, it was a very exciting time. See, I'm a nerd, so it was exciting time for hormone research. Or goes like really sorry. No, it's good. So in 1995, for those of you who've taken some physiology courses, there was a hormone called leptin discovered that that really was the first time to show that there was sort of the body could communicate with the brain to regulate things like appetite and energy expenditure, and therefore the regulation of body weight. And so this hormone that I was working on was very related to that. So I got quite interested in physiology in the context of, health and disease, diabetes, obesity. And so I chose to go off and do my postdoctoral fellowship with a group in Cambridge, England, who worked in the area of obesity. And what was interesting about their lab is there was about half of the lab was PhD postdocs and about half of the lab were MDs doing fellowships. And we worked in a very integrated way. So we would come from the mechanisms and how does this relate to health, and they would come to tell us stories about patients that had presentations, and they were very interested in understanding what those molecular biological mechanisms were. And it was very even playing field. It wasn't like one was more important or the other, but we worked very much together. And so I think it was, while I was interested in health during my PhD, I feel like I kind of became a health researcher as a postdoc and really addressing health issues from foundational sciences and understanding the mechanisms and how those may contribute to our understanding of disease and also therapeutics. So I think that's where I really felt like I was a health researcher. And then now my position for UNBC since 2007 has been with the Northern Medical Program. My program of research is still very foundational in the area of diabetes and obesity. But I also, in being affiliated with that department, interact directly with training of healthcare professionals.
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to get you to sort of start to see from hearing those stories, we're not going to ask everybody the same question again with the rest of the questions, but is to sort of recognize that most people probably have another place where they might have had an origin or a base, or where they're really, some of the areas are really focused on a content area, but they've also come to identify themselves in this very broad terrain of health research. And that there's a lot of, as you'll hear in these other questions, there's not just be gained by valuing that sort of particular focus and then also connecting with the larger world of health research. And as folks doing their honours or masters, or some of you involved in the PhD program, that's something we really pride ourselves on at UNBC is thinking about the both and approach to sort of having your area that you get particularly excited about. And then also having that broader engagement. So I'm just going to we're going to go through and ask most people one other question and then sort of come around and do all that. So I'm going to come around for this next one to Neil and Katie about this idea of what factors have influenced your choices to focus your health research in Northern BC. And I think, Katie, there's some interest here about you've had your own research, but also now in the Knowledge Synthesis Centre, kind of where some of those Northern BC lessons. So I'll start with you, Neil. How do you feel about what have you got to tell us about the choice?
Well, my position. So I'm 20 years now at UNBC.
Woohoo.
Yeah, so that, and my position came out of I guess I'm the tail end of the growth period of UNBC, right?
Yeah.
And my position came out of a department review at the time, identified a need, and so we need some help here. We need one or two more faculty. What are the areas? And Prince George had just had the strike, the protest at the CN Center, which is now the CN Center, the physician shortage, right? And 5,000 people filled the arena and said, we need action, we need help up here, we need to fix the shortage of physicians and so And so, coming on the heels of that, the chair and the committee at the time said, we need a medical geographer, a health geographer. And, but as well, that story was conveyed to me, that the position exists because there's this need here.
Yeah.
And so when I arrived, I was doing research in Nova Scotia. I had lots of research going on in Ontario. And I guess I could have kept that going and kept those networks going. But immediately I said, no, okay, I get it. I'm here. There's shortages here, health services, recruitment, retention, access and utilization. That's where I'll put my energies. And so right from the get-go, I said, I chose a regional focus. I chose to explore the things I wanted to explore, but here, not somewhere else.
And that means you're pretty uniquely positioned in the field in your field. You've got a whole lot of unique perspectives to contribute to the health geography.
Yeah, it hasn't hurt me at all
Yeah.
in terms of people, elsewhere want to hear what's going on in a smaller center or more remote centers and the challenges of all that. It doesn't. It's been no harm to me to say, well, I'll do my research here. I'll base it here because there's so much that's going on here that's interesting that people want to hear.
I remember in my first week at UNBC, or first weeks, I had a chat with Neil, and I'd come from the Lower Mainland where everything feels a bit crowded, and you sort of feel like you might be, clashing with people that have similar interests. And I knew that Neil and I had some interests because one of my supervisors was a geographer, and I sort of was saying, how does what I'm interested in sound to you, and is it going to overlap? And he said, looks like you've got about 20 years of research. and he also said, don't worry about clashing with people because there's a lot of space and a lot of issues. And I think that's one of the things that it was a helpful reminder that, especially if you're collaborative, you can overlap with people and it can be a bit of a clash. But if you're sort of wanting to connect rather than compete, it's a very fertile environment. So thanks heaps, Neil. So Katie, you've started. Do you have a question?
I'm so sorry, there was a question.
Oh, great. That sounds like a fantastic, okay. Okay, we'll come back to that question in a minute. What we'll do is we'll just finish this round and then we might go to, we might come around to you, Sarah, and you might be able to weave in a response to that question. We'll have a look at it. So, Katie. You started the story of your interest in Northern BC, but how do you feel like that's matured as you've done your masters and now with the Knowledge Synthesis Centre and the HRI?
Yeah, so I think for me, getting to kind of choose my own project and choose my own research, I for my master's looked at the mental health and well-being impacts of resource extraction, specifically around terrace and Kitimat. And again, it kind of circles back to what Neil's talking about, the need, like Northern BC always has need, essentially. We never have enough of anything, it seems like. And something that you shouldn't discount is your personal interest too, right? Like, I think you should really follow something that you like and you enjoy and you find passion with, right? So for me, that was looking at how resource dependent communities, how that impacts mental health and well-being of the people that live there, and also some of our care providers that we're providing mental health services, Terrace and Kitimat specifically. And I really enjoyed the contextualization component of my own research. Now, to give you a little bit of an idea of what I do, so I am a research associate with the Health Research Institute and the only employee of the Knowledge Synthesis Center. So that means that I'm in a kind of a neat little role where I support lots of our different faculty methodologically. So that could be any kind of evidence synthesis, like tons of different health related topics. I get to help all these different faculty on these really cool projects. And one of the key features that we provide at the HRI is that contextualization, right? So it's what makes research that comes out of UNBC different than rural research that comes out of UBC or UVic or Toronto, right? Like the work that we're doing is different because we have more of a finger on the pulse of what's actually going on in these small communities and we kind of experience more of the lack of resources or lack of things firsthand, right? So contextualization is key.
Well, that's really exciting, Katie, and it's neat to hear that perspective on that need for contextualization is relevant across so many different researchers, which one of the things that also sometimes happens at UNBC is because there is this ongoing need, is that there's often, you do your master's or your project and then another person will pick up. And I was just thinking as Katie was speaking, that I now have new researchers that are interested in mental health and wellbeing kind of issues. And I was thinking, oh, I'm going to have to send them Katie's thesis. Because that can happen in UNBC. Somebody can start, finish their honours or their masters or their thesis, and then that might feed into the next generation of work. And because there's a need, that's a really exciting possibility. So Sarah, we've got a nice kind of overlap here, that the question I was going to ask you is about a tip that you might want others to know about, and it probably jives a little bit with some of these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think I can answer this. Sorry, I don't know if you asked the question. But
No, I don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question, and I agree. It's not without barriers to have that kind of collaboration happen seamlessly, for sure. I can't say. I think it's. I've had projects here at UNBC where I have successfully collaborated with physicians. We've done a clinical project here with Kenny Graham, who was a academic psychiatrist. She's now no longer here, but it was more than just about an individual collaboration. It was about a culture and a philosophy for how to approach research, and I think that takes more than just single collaborations, even though it can start there. So actually, I think right now, currently, there has been some interest locally to help to support clinical research. I don't think it's a secret, but I think that there's some work being done to create a center for clinical research here in Northern BC that will be a very unique collaboration between UBC, UNBC, as well as Northern Health. And I think it's infrastructure like that will help promote those kinds of networks that then allow people to not only come together in individual collaborations, but actually for there to be a culture of interaction with people who have sort of different, other commitments. So of course, academic clinicians, we do have academic clinicians here, but we also have clinical faculty who don't have a formal academic position, like a tenure track position, who also really want to engage in research, but they also provide service. And then we have academic researchers, for example, myself, that has like lab-based research here, that has my own program of research, but I might be able to contribute to sort of clinical projects. So I'm really hopeful that those kinds of infrastructure, other things like HRI, where we do these kinds of initiatives where we bring people together, even just hearing about different research, I think it's those kinds of things that over time could really help to facilitate those kinds of, that kind of culture where we work together. And I think in Northern BC, we do that well anyway. Like, I think just the very fact, like I would have never collaborated, I don't think, with an academic psychiatrist had it not been that she was 2 doors down from me and we used to go for tea. Whereas, for example, when I worked in England, or I was at UBC for a time with the diabetes research group, it was wonderful in that we were all together, people doing diabetes research, but we kind of end up spinning the same ideas on each other because we're all doing the same thing. So there's pros and cons to each kind of environment. But I think here at UNBC, that's one of our real strengths, is that we interact with a diverse array of health researchers, and that can lead to a really nice culture for collaboration.
Nice, Sarah, thank you. And so I'm actually going to come round, Damon, to you about, we've sort of, Sarah's kind of leaned into this idea of especially that being willing to have cups of tea and imagine creative, innovative connections that you might not. And so I'm going to ask you, Damon, what tip might you have? I mean, it's kind of neat for you because you were an undergrad and a master's and a PhD, so you've got folks here from all stages of that career. What tips might you offer for people that are wanting to be health researchers? Can you hear me okay, Damon?
I can, yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I guess my tip would be to the students is just to get involved and seek opportunity. I know as a student, it can be intimidating to get involved, especially for students that are first generation or BIPOC and you don't see yourself represented in some fields. But you have to start somewhere. So, approach a faculty member or a student or, a master's student, a PhD, just reach out and you'll find people are often willing to help or direct you towards someone that can help you. And even if you don't see research as, a full-time career for yourself, it offers a great skill set of transferable skills that you can take to other jobs. And on that note, I'm by no means an expert, but I'm happy to chat if there are any students that, want to know more about applying to grad school or what that kind of experience can be like.
What a great offer, Damon. And I think it is such an important message that Damon said that you reach out and get involved. I really think of you as someone that's done that at all stages. And just to be really clear, that's not just a benefit to Damon, it's this huge benefit to those of us that have worked with her. So this is the thing, is that no matter who comes in, the different backgrounds, different experiences, that the Health Research Institute, for example, is always really keen to have those different student experiences. We have student representatives on the Leadership Council, and that's really important. And we're always looking for ideas of ways that we can't do everything, but we're really looking for targeted opportunities of things that students might really want to happen. And so I know that Leanne is open to suggestions from students, and it's easy to find her address. And we mentioned earlier about becoming a member of the HRI, and it's not a big hurdle. It's a very weird, in fact, you sort of almost or are by being a health researcher or interested in health research, you're kind of a member. But there would be more likelihood that you'll receive notifications or you'll get updates, or because of our list and the way that we communicate with the people that have signed up, because we don't want to just bombard everybody with everything. So if you're just even remotely curious, sign up and you'll hear about those opportunities Damon's mentioning. So Christiana, I'm going to come around to you, and then we'll come back to Trina. But Christiana, what would you say in terms of things that have been influential in how you do your health research, and how might you offer any sort of suggestions for other students as they're sort of imagining building on those influences? Over to you, Christiana. Can we still hear you?
Okay, so I just want to clarify. I don't think I quite got the question.
Yeah, that's fine. I was probably also I turned off my outside voice to reach the microphone. So it was that question number 5 that we had. So what would you say has been the most influential in the way that you undertake health research that's cut across all those different disciplinary and other boundaries?
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I'll say my positionality as a Black researcher of African origin working in Canada as somehow influenced how I engage with health research. It has sort of compelled me to gain new skills and knowledge, and particularly in I would say in reflexivity with regards to embracing openness and questioning my own assumptions as well, in order to be able to work in this landscape. And in terms of who has influenced my engagement with health research, well, I will accord that largely to the amazing people I've met in UNBC, or in the sense of the classes I've taken and the wonderful research team I belong in, the environment, community, and health Earth Observatory Network. That's a HECO network led by Margaret Parks. Well, yeah, and honestly, the theme has really, they've largely, shaping my approach to doing research. I mean, in Northern BC and in Canada generally, I think the team's approach to doing health research, captures the determinants of health in their wide-ranging dynamics, which I actually described in my earlier question, response to the first question. And this has really informed my current work.
Well, it's really neat to hear that team approach. Christiana, we've talked about it a lot, that it does actually often, it's really difficult to do cross-cutting complex work by yourself. And I do think that those connections are actually one of the things that really bring it to life. And it's been really neat to see that unfold in your work, and it actually is a very nice segue to the next question, because I had another question for Trina, which is that my question was, do you have a dream team or a superpower to support your research, and what would that involve? So Trina, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this question made me really uncomfortable. But I had a moment where I was thinking about this, and I had a conversation with my partner and my son, who's 11, on the weekend. We were watching Batman versus Superman.
Oh,
and it's who has the superpower. And I was like, well, Superman inherently has a superpower, right? Like he was born with it. But Batman doesn't. He learned his skills and has all the tools to make himself a superhero. So I identify as Batman. And so I'm going with it. So I'm identifying myself as Batman because I took the training in my grad school, in my master's, where I learned how to do searching, right? And I became an expert searcher. And then over time, that's essentially what I do. So my superpower would be searching.
nice.
And the tools that I have to help me do that. But then my dream team is right here. We'll call you Alfred. No, but he's coming up next. That's right. No, but in all seriousness, you can't do a knowledge synthesis with just one person.
Yep.
And so you need to bring all these people to the table. And if you're doing a systematic review with a meta-analysis, you need a statistician. You need someone who is a methods expert. You need the searcher. You need the experts in the room who can do the review and guide you in that process. So yeah, I think you can bring your superpowers to the table, and everyone else's superpowers. What are they called? What's the Avengers? The Avengers, right? Yeah. So you end up with a team. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
And that's great, Trina. Thanks for running with that question. But I think the nice thing about the reason it is a playful question, but the reason to kind of channel the superpower idea is that, in fact, it connects with Katie's earlier topic, which is that we're all a unique combination of our training, our circumstances, what kind of our quirky things that we get excited and enthusiastic about, and in combination that, I mean, even as an honors student, but as you're moving through a master's or PhD, sort of quietly you are developing your own superpower, and we quite often forget that it's not just what we've studied that creates that combination. And I think one of the nice things about UNBC is that it is, and Northern BC as a place to work, is that it enables you to kind of bring all of those things together, especially if you're doing teamwork, and that's often what makes teams hold together, is that we're, as well as researchers, we're people. And so we've now finished our sort of 2 rounds of questions. I do have more questions because I'm always full of questions. That would be my superpower, I think, just asking questions. It's the way I came to come to be a professor, was I just kept asking questions. But we're hoping that you might have some questions. So that will be people online. Great to have some folks that have joined just now. Welcome. You get to ask questions of our fabulous panel, including 2 other people that are online. But in the room here, as we wait for any that might get typed up on the screen, is there any questions from anyone, including the students? I like to start with the students, so just hold
And
them.
I'll just say you can ask anything, like
Anyone.
anyone to know
Yeah.
anything about how we got into what we did, careers, balanced family life, all that, like, to me, it's on the table, whatever you'd like. To me, I'm open to it.
It's a tough question, Sarah.
Yeah. Sarah. Yeah. Yes.
Sarah, what's your favorite hormone?
No, actually, no, I think my favorite hormone is, so I work on a hormone called, it's a real mouthful. Katrina's in the room, she's a new undergrad student in my lab, so it's called pituitary adenylate cyclase activating polypeptide, or PACAP. I've worked on that peptide for 20 years and I still can't say it's my favorite because it's super complicated and it irritates me sometimes because I can't figure it out. So I think my favorite hormone is leptin. It's a fantastic hormone. It's made by adipose tissue. It was the first hormone to be known that adipose tissue or fat made hormones. And it's just so cool because it tells your brain how much energy reserves you have. And so I just think it's the coolest and it's an easy one to teach. And so it's my favorite.
Nice, great question. Any other questions
Is it the-
from the crowd here of anyone?
There was one on the chat.
Yeah, great. Marcelo, thanks. So the question is, in what ways the Northern culture might facilitate some forms or approaches of health research? And do you foresee some unique vantage points that North offers as a distinct feature of the region? Great question, digging into that contextualization thing we were talking about before. I could imagine anybody having things to say from the panel, but does anyone want to have a go? We'll get a couple of responses to that.
Well, it does depend, I'll take a crack at it. It does depend on what you mean by culture, but we had a little discussion earlier about, the close connections between Northern Health and UNBC. And I think, and that's reflected in an MOU that we have, an agreement that we have. Martha's position is funded by her endowed chair is funded by Northern Health. They're just a really good partner, and they're just people you can reach out to, and they reach out to us if they need a question answered and that kind of thing. So I think that is unique. I think that is I don't think that's something you see in many other places. And I think it has something to do with the fact that we're this little remote university. We're very small in the grand scheme of things in terms of, it's a research university, but it's a very small research university. Everybody kind of knows everybody and has an opportunity to know what everybody else is doing. So that's unique. You've got the same kind of challenge for Northern Health. You've got all these people in management, administrative, and practical positions, providers and practitioners and so on. And again, there's only one of each. And so then you have to get to know what this other person does in this other field. And it's just so much easier to make those connections. And it's easier for everybody to know everybody. And I think that is unique. And I think it leads to really interesting transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary sort of collaboration. So I think that would be my response to that question.
And I think leaning into, it's great that we've got another one from Anam here, so we'll come to that in a second. But I think that the culture is also, and the partnerships at UNBC are also evolving. So for those of you that are going to be here for the next few years, I think it'll be really interesting for you to watch how some of these partnerships are shifting. So one of the points is the really important influence of the First Nations Health Authority kind of coming in and being part of the wider culture of things here. And like a lot of institutions that are pan-provincial, there's always sort of a capacity sort of growing phase that I think is slowly happening with FNHA as they also equip themselves to deal with some of the specific, a huge commitment to addressing health authority needs. But then there are also particular partnerships that, if you go back in the archives of the HRI seminar series, which I'd encourage you to do, because they are actually, there's some fabulous talks there. There's some really important partnerships with Carissa County Family Services that Tammy has been really involved in, and those of you that are in class can ask her about that. But there's also particularly, I think there's even at UNBC, the previous co-lead of the Health Research Institute, Henry Harder, is now, as an Indigenous scholar, he's now he's the Vice Principal of Indigenous Initiatives. And that's a necessary, overdue, some would argue, and I would, kind of role that UNBC is being much more overt in its commitment to be addressing the particular challenges and important strengths as well that comes from all of our Indigenous partners and the various cultures. Likewise, in the sort of culture world is, I think, new waves of attention to the important role of new Canadians and new immigrants coming into Northern BC, and that's been a really big, that's a growing area of interest as well, which is what's happening to the changing demographics in Northern BC, and what that means for different needs and concerns across the community. So I think it's a great question from Anand here. I'd like to know if UNBC is conducting researches that are hospital-based as well as lab-based, or if anybody's doing any research on COVID. So great question. And I'm probably going to start the answer there with Sarah, because I think that when I mentioned the things that are changing, this new clinical research partnership that's emerging is going to be one of the things that we're going to see come onto the scene over the next while. So I wonder, Sarah, it's a big question, but
yeah, it's a bit of a big question, because when you say hospital-based research, I think that's already occurring across a variety of researchers. If we're talking about physicians doing research, we do at the Northern Medical Program have 4 positions for academic clinicians. So, for example, I won't talk about all of them, but we have a physician who has an academic position with BC Cancer that is appointed through the Northern Medical Program, who has a program of research that's quite diverse, but includes research on, specifically on patient care at BC Cancer for the Centre of the North. Jackie Pedersen, who's a neurologist, who's also an academic clinician, who works on vitamin D and neurological disease. And so that's already been happening for many years, but I think what the idea is that the center is a place that would provide some supports to support that type of research. So for example, and why is that important to Northern BC? Well, if you think about like for the Northern Medical Program, the advancement of research in general is kind of our next phase. So we were sort of tasked with training physicians to address a shortage of physicians, which is part of the inequitable healthcare that's being delivered in the North. But the lack of research or clinical research that's occurring is another inequity that is experienced by people who live in rural and northern areas of Canada. For example, the availability of clinical trials, just access to health researchers, the education that provides to the workforce, et cetera. So I think it's sort of an evolving area. It's happening already at UHNBC, but I think it is an evolving area, and we hope that it will be more, will grow, will be able for growth in the next few years. I don't know if I really addresses it. Did that?
Well, I think it's actually, I think, helping to point out that it's an area that's evolving, and that there is more happening than there used to be, and that it's happening in different ways, and that UNBC is partnering in different ways. I don't know if the COVID research is an interesting. Tammy's got a thought on there.
Yeah, I know a little bit about you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do know that at the nursing department, there actually is some COVID research being done. So yeah, there's some being done not in the hospital, but in long-term care homes, just to determine whether or not the impact of COVID, what that's had on people working in long-term care homes, not the patients themselves, but actually the people that are working there. So that's something that, I know I'm involved with, and I think we're starting that shortly.
Yeah,
I
it's
think.
exciting.
But yeah, so there's some.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
Katie,
then
you've
just
got
building
some-
on that, like I know, because I get to support all these cool projects.
Yeah.
Some of them are on COVID, so like right now I'm working with Dr. Caroline Sanders and we're looking at how COVID is impacting early years, so like birth to 5 years old, how families are struggling to access things like early childhood education or accessing things like even medical appointments, like with them all switching to virtual. So we've been doing like some qualitative research around that. And then I know that Dr. Chelsea Pelletier has also been doing, wasn't supposed to be in, but it is now in the context of COVID, some work around children's independent mobility. So like how kids move and play unsupervised around their neighborhoods and how that has changed in light of COVID.
And the link's just been put up in the chat.
Oh, cool. That's nice. Well, it's nice to see some of these interactions underway. So Erica's got, thanks Erica, great question. Curious from Damon and Christiana and recent and current PhD students, if they have one piece of advice that they would give to new students at the start of their research, what would have been valuable for them to have heard at the beginning? Such a great question. So Christiana, over to you to start, and then we'll come around to Damon. Oh, Christiana's muted. She may have been called away with the juggles that she's doing. Oh, and Damon's connecting to audio, but back. Damon, can we come to you first on that question? Are you able to see that? I think you may have just reconnected. Oh. We might have to come back to Damon went on mute. Christiana, are you there? Damon's got a connection issue. Well, we know it's a good question, Erica, but it's terrified them. They've run away. Trina, what do you go?
Let's run.
Yeah, that's right. We'll start with you, Trina, just in case, having done it not relatively recently.
Relatively, yeah. I think what I would have done differently is really get to know my cohort better. So I had a really small cohort, and because I was working full-time at the same time, I felt really disconnected from my peers. And so I would really encourage you, that would be one thing I would do differently is really make sure and draw on each other's experiences as you go along and what you've learned. The other thing is to respectfully stop people. And so I know you're like, what did you, but why did you invite her? But like I was always intimidated to get in contact with researchers and those leaders in the field. And so I had to kind of get over that. And I think it's okay they're busy people, to email them, and if they don't get back to you email them again.
Yes.
With some space in between and with some very kind language. But I think you really don't feel intimidated by that, because they do really want to interact with you. It's just they don't always have the time. And so they will find a space for you. It just may take a while. So those would be my two things.
Great things. And I cannot underscore that last point enough, that one of the best parts of your job description as any kind of honors, master's, PhD, postdoc, is that you've got this fabulous excuse to ask questions of people, and that it's part of your job description is to use that privilege.
Yeah.
Where one of the things you'll learn as a researcher is that such an important part of the research culture is kind of peer review and engagement, and part of that is responding to questions. And so it is something, and Trina's advice to ask and then wait and then ask again. I have colleagues that I still tease about the fact that they blanked me on the first email, and they became some of my first, some of the longest standing colleagues I've had, just because they were too busy that first time. So especially in this era where we've got slightly less conferences and opportunities to meet people face to face, conferences are often a great place to do that. And if you do go to online conferences, use the same principle, like, connect with people. So, but that's also, we're coming around to sort of towards the end of our time. We want to be wrapping up in about 10 minutes or some time and thereabouts. So I'll just check, Christiana, are you with us? We've got a juggle of, I know there's various people coming back from childcare and things happening. And Damon might have, but Erica, I'd strongly encourage you to put in the same spirit, write them an email or connect with them. But what I was going to mention is that particularly for the cohort, we've now, I'm just going to underscore that for the PhD cohort, we now have the, it's part of the seminar, the PhD seminar, to come and participate in these seminars, to be writing little assignments about them. We know that those of you that are here in the honours and masters, that's the same for this semester. But that we're really wanting to, especially given that we have been separate for a while, we're really wanting to build these seminars as a moment where we do have presentations, but we also get to have conversations together. So it is one of those places where you can benefit from your cohort and maybe plan to have a coffee after the seminar and go and have a chat. And but those are things that we're really eager to cultivate. So I'm going to hold open if there's any other little curiosities, favourite hormone questions, anything of interest. Yes, go for it.
This question isn't for anybody in particular, but I guess what would you say are like the biggest pros and cons of doing research in like northern BC versus a more populated area?
Great question. So I think what I'm going to do with that one is I'm just going to, we're going to do a lap round our final with our panelists, see if we, and offer in conjunction with answering that question, we're going to get people if there's any other of those final tips that they want to offer or reflections. So I will start with you, Sarah. Yeah, pros and cons and final tips.
Yeah, I think that pros, what I've really loved about doing my research here in northern BC, it's not like a lot of the questions I ask are about sort of advancing our understanding of physiology and metabolism, but I have to pick my head up and think about how it relates to the world around me a little bit more, because I do work with a diverse group of health researchers. And so it makes me consider what I'm doing in the context of the broader picture of health research. So I really like that piece of it. And then I think probably anywhere, I don't want to be too negative, because what I'm going to say is it's hard sometimes being the only diabetes researcher who does lab-based work in the north. But then it forces me to have to reach out and stay connected. So it's sort of been something that can be hard sometimes, but it's forced me to really make good connections. And so I really have kept strong connections with people that I work with in Vancouver, Alberta, across Canada, and also in Europe. And so it's sort of sometimes hard, but it's a positive.
That's funny.
Did I go too long?
No, you didn't.
No, I just switched screens really suddenly.
I'm thinking Pink Floyd here.
Oh, this is great. That's really funny when we can see, you can play with that if you want to, but we'll try not to distract it. All right, so thanks, Sarah. And a good question. We'll carry on with this pros and cons final tips. We'll come around to you, Katie.
Just building off that, I think our weakness is also our strength, right? Like our lack of resources, and there's, one diabetes researcher in the north, right? Like it really forces us to reach out and use who's around us, right? We have to reach farther than, some people in more urban centers. And another thing that I think is a pro is like, if you go downtown on Saturday, you will run into like, not COVID times, but you'll run into all these people, and we just kind of build our culture wonderfully formally but also informally. I think that's a big pro for me.
Nice. Thanks, Katie. Trina.
Yeah, just starting with the con is just exactly what you both said is sometimes it can feel a little isolating. So yeah, just reaching out is key. Just not so much as doing research, but working at a smaller institution, you get more opportunities to branch out and do other things. So I get teaching opportunities that I never would have at larger institutions as a librarian. So that's kind of a, for sure, positive.
Nice. So I can see that Christiana's and to bounce, the audio's come in and out a few times.
Hi, sorry, my network just logged me out.
Oh, did
So
it? Well, welcome back. And we're just doing our last lap of questions. It was a really nice question about what would be some of the pros and cons of working in Northern BC, and if there's any final tips that you have for people that are particularly PhD students that you wish that you'd like to share. Did you
okay, I will speak to the last question. Let's say for an incoming PhD student, I'll say one piece of advice, so to say, would be to target your classes and tailor them towards the specific area of your research. I think it will sort of help you to be able to, understand, some of the lapses even in your own research methodologies or scope of your work. And it will help you to do that faster, yeah.
That's a great tip, Christiana, is to sort of channel those seminar courses to explore different areas and stretch your comfort zones while you can. Really great tip, thank you. So I think we will come around to you, Neil, as we finish up our pros and cons and final tips.
You bet. Pros and cons. We are working in a fishbowl, right, over here. And so it means either you're working with a group or you're doing research that involves a community or something. You've got to live with these people and so on. That's a thing that you have to keep in mind. It's also a real advantage. So there's no fly in and fly out research. You're going to develop relationships with people and with organizations, which is good, but it takes time and it takes an investment, but there's a real payoff as well, because you get better data and you'll understand the situation better. But this fishbowl thing means you can't do fly in and fly out. No one's ever going to talk to you again if you just sort of take the data and run and then write something. And, so that I think is the pros and cons, but I'd say more pros than cons. And the advice, we're on this campus where, and there might be a conference of some kind. Maybe it doesn't look like it relevant to you. Sneak in the back or volunteer so that you can see what goes on, even if it's not quite your field. As a grad student, especially as a PhD student, really valuable just to see that experience, people coming together, networking, and what goes on at these things, how you should conduct yourself, how you shouldn't, because if you're kind of observing from the background, you'll see examples of both good behavior and poor behavior. That'd be my advice.
Well, that's a great piece of advice, Neil. And it would definitely applies, knowing the honours team and the fact that the honours programs, plural, are also a place where people are getting that early sense of being a trainee, that there are so many possibilities, and be curious. So the conferences are a really good opportunity. We hope that we'll be having more of those. This is a good encouragement that we can have a panel with our masks on and still manage to have that sense of interaction. So so a really neat session. I always feel invigorated by the scope of folks that we have.
One small question.
One more question, because UNBC have its own journal in health sciences. As an international student, I'm asking. Oh gosh, good question. No, we don't. I don't think that has hit our radar, but it is an interesting, and I think that the probably the equivalent to a journal in terms of where you can kind of learn and see about what different examples is probably our seminar series, and our archive
Yeah.
of past presentations. Like it's an amazingly high quality of research shown, and we've been going for several years now, and every session I go to, it's like, wow, that's impressive. And we've only to date mostly been focusing on UNBC researchers at different stages, and as I mentioned earlier, we're pushing ourselves, so we still haven't finished all the UNBC researchers, but there'll be some seminars with folks outside, including next week, we're going to have Julia and Marcelo next week, next month. Next third Thursday of the month, we're going to have Marcelo and Julia presenting about some really exciting innovations around knowledge exchange and knowledge translation in the new research department at Northern Health, and we'll be looking to connect with other partners as well. So I really want to give a huge thanks to our panelists. So as I said, if you remember, you can turn the question around to me at the end, but we don't have time.
Convenient work.
That's right, how convenient, but Sarah will remind me that I'm yet to do a seminar series, so she's been very happy, so that'll happen sometime
This will
soon.
happen this year.
Yeah, I think it probably will. So, I really want to thank Leanna and Alex and Katie who helped with the setup. We were quite ambitious trying to pull off a panel in our first one for the year. But I think it's been a really good thing to do, and we were thinking we'll probably have to do it again sometime. So thanks for you guys. Really nice to have you in the room. Big thanks to there was 17 people online at some point. 20.
Yeah.
20 people online, so that's great. And we really thank you all for being here, and we'll clear out because there's another class coming in here.
Is there an actual class in here?
At 4, yes.
Oh,
Okay, guys, we're gonna be moving back to our other classroom.
oh,
now.
that's right. We
Yeah,
said that you can stay here, sorry.
Oh, that's okay, no, as long as we know.
You're
So-
stretching
Oh, I
legs.
should, oh, sorry.
That's okay.
But
No,
then I would have arranged.
and scheduling is such that it probably wouldn't be possible to change it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
They
So,
said they're still
Thanks, everybody.
looking, so bounce around.
Okay, so,
Sure.
Are you gonna-